Trump won the 2024 election driven largely by Americans' view on the economy. I'm an economist and I specialize in federal policy. What do I make of all this? I have, I think, three things to say immediately. One, the problem that Trump tapped into, the anger he was able to capitalize in being ushered back into the presidency, it is a problem that is so much bigger than inflation for 2 years. It is a 5 decade stagnation and decline in American living standards. It's not just 12 months of inflation or 18 months of inflation. It is a structural failing of our economy, and he tapped into it and made it very palpable for Americans, as did inflation. The second thing is that however deep or big that problem is, he is probably not going to solve it or even address it at all. I mean, he's good at tapping into anger, but he doesn't have economic policy solutions for what is driving the problems that most Americans are facing. So that means my third thing that the future is whoever can build the solution, right? Democrats lost the election, but they can still win the problem if they can come up with a set of solutions that will actually address it. Americans have told us how angry they are about certain aspects of the economy. Trump isn't going to fix it. The policies that he's articulated don't even come close to addressing it, which means we have to identify the solutions to build a better economy. We have to make people feel empowered that they can fix their economy. One of the most striking exit poll numbers that I saw on like this NBC review was just how high a share of Americans think that the best days of America are behind us. I have a very small platform, which is like me and my hostage like situation closet. And I have a column for Bloomberg. But to the extent I have that platform, I will use it to make Americans feel like the best is yet to come because there are so many economic policy solutions that we simply have not pursued. We won't pursue them over the next 4 years, but we can do it in the future. And I want to use my space to talk about it. So, first, what is the decline in American living standards, this economic problem that Trump tapped into? So the short version is American wage growth for the bottom 50% of Americans has not been high enough to maintain the same standard of living that they had before for certain key goods. So from 1973 to 2023, this is a 5 decade period over a lot of presidencies, a lot of Democrat and Republican swings in power. The net wage growth, real wage growth, right? This is wage growth net of inflation. The real wage growth of the bottom 50% was $3, meaning if they made 10.50 in 1973, workers at a similar place in the distribution made 13.50 in 2023. It's a $3 increase in wages over prices. That's next to nothing. That means that for the bottom half of Americans, their wage has barely kept up with inflation for almost 5 decades. Now, in terms of living standards, right? Living standards aren't a monolith. If your wage keeps up with inflation, you can afford things whose price is slower than inflation overall. And we have a lot of goods in the US whose price grows slower than inflation overall. Appliances, electronics, TVs, smartphones, computers, clothing, household furniture, a lot of like recreational consumption like books and music and movies, those have all grown much slower than prices overall, and so that's a living standard that has improved for a lot of Americans. Even cars have grown a lot slower than prices overall, kind of up into this last spike of inflation. So people can have more cars, they can have smartphones and TVs and tablets and household furniture and appliances, and they can afford all of that more. That living standard has increased. What they can't afford are the goods whose prices rise faster than inflation. And these are the big ones: housing, healthcare, childcare, college tuition. All of these rise much faster than prices overall, which means that even as Americans are maybe able to afford more consumer goods on average, they're not able to afford these kind of hallmark American goods like a house. Well, this is a 5 decade problem, and it has a lot of like variation within these 5 decades. Some years, some eras are better than others. Well, during the inflation spike of 2021, it basically pushed kind of this 5 decade simmering problem to the edge. Food, which had been, basically price for food has grown with the price of inflation overall for most of the period I'm talking about. It jumps above inflation. And all of a sudden, you have American households who maybe had grown accustomed to the fact that they couldn't afford housing, or they couldn't afford healthcare, or they can't afford childcare, and suddenly they can't afford food. It was such an acute realization, such a like a breaking point moment for a problem that has been going on for so long. It was basically like an economic bill that came due during Biden's administration. I mean, for the record, I think Biden did a pretty remarkable job considering we didn't fall into a recession. But I also know that that's really cold comfort to tell people, like, oh, you can't afford your life anymore, but hey, at least we're not in recession. Like, you can't tell people to feel better that it's not worse when they already feel bad enough. So that is a very real economic problem, and voters told us in 2024, that it is salient for them, and that however long it's been cooking, it's salient now. Well, that is a pretty intense economic problem, and 5 decades of stagnating wage growth and a price kind of not out of control, but prices increasing for goods like housing, healthcare, childcare, college tuition. Those aren't like necessarily quick fixes. But I think my second take would be, however deep this problem goes, however upset Americans are about it, I don't think Trump's going to do much about it because he hasn't articulated any policy that gets to the root of the problem, either how much those things cost or how much Americans earn. The deportation policy and the tariff policy, I don't even really give those the dignity of being an economic policy. He has found that Americans enjoy blaming people. It's a pretty natural instinct. He's able to capitalize on it well. And like right now, everything is China and immigrants' fault. And so we've designed policy to be, deliver retribution to them. They have economic consequences, but they're not economic policy. And I think he'll make a show of pursuing them. It'll cause some problems, and he'll be like, well, they won't let me do it anymore. Something like that. Rile up his base, but not actually pursue them. The one policy that he is guaranteed to pursue is a tax cut because he cut taxes in 2017. Most of the tax cut is going to expire on the household side. And so now he wants to renew the tax cuts that he passed. This will not help Americans. And if you think that that's a crazy statement, let me remind you, we have cut taxes on trillions of dollars of levels in 2001, 2003, 2012, and 2017. Is the 2025 tax cut going to solve all the problems that those prior four did not? I mean, we have spent over $8 trillion on reducing taxes for Americans. And you know what? They can't afford housing, they can't afford childcare, they can't afford food. We can blame these things on the inflation that took place under Biden, but these tax cuts did nothing to help the living standards of Americans because you cannot change the trajectory of living standards. You cannot radically improve Americans' living standards through a tax cut. You have to build policy around addressing problems, and tax cuts simply don't do it. But we're probably going to spend another $4 trillion on them because that's how much his tax cut is supposed to cost. That's what the estimates are right now, which means we'll have invested $12 trillion over a 25-year period into a proven non solution for the economic problems that Americans have said very clearly is what is important to them right now. Politicians and politics will change America's view on the economy. If you're a Democrat, you're happier when a Democrat's in office. When you're a Republican, you're happier when a Republican's in office. But this problem will not go away, even if Americans are less angry about it once he's in there. Tax cuts aren't going to do it. They're going to cost a lot of money, and they're going to fail to solve the problem, as they have failed to solve the problem on 4 prior occasions. And we are going to arrive at the same place. I mean, it's just a different version of the same place in 4 years. The last thing I want to say, while I have the time to say it, is that we have great policy solutions that America has not put in place that can help Americans. It requires paying for them, it requires an investing in them, but I think more than anything, it requires Americans believing that they could be effective. And that is what I will do in this platform, is talk about these policy solutions, talk about positive ways forward to help people feel empowered about what America can accomplish. We've shown that we can make Americans angry. So now let's make Americans optimistic about what they can achieve in their own economic security. That is what I will do here. That is my third takeaway from the election. I hope you follow me and you can kind of come along on this journey as we talk through what the problems are in America and how we can solve them. It won't come out of the next administration, but that doesn't mean it won't come at all. We can build a better future. We can absolutely build a better future.